Hey everybody, so here is tutorial 1 part 2 where we're going to look at some more messages to the jit.gl.gridshape object, and these are also things that you can type in as attributes if you use the @ sign. And we're going to look at creating compositions using multiple objects. When I say composition, I just mean an arrangement or a design of objects using multiple jit.gl.gridshape objects, and we'll look at some strategies to change those arrangements within the patch. So here we have our grid shape. Right now we're controlling color. As we've seen, we can also change the dimensionality. And when we change the dimensionality, sometimes it's nice to turn off the smooth shading. We can see the change more readily. One thing you can do is if you want to send two messages, you can separate them by a comma. So now this message box sets the dimensionality and turns off smooth shading on the object at the same time, because it sends this message first and then comma sends the smooth shading 0 message second. We can also change the scale of objects, and scale is in meters. So right now the scale of this object is 1 meter. If we want it to be half the size, we'd say scale 0.5, and it'll be half the size. I'm going to restore the dimensionality so this looks like a sphere again, and turn smooth shading back on for now. If we use multiple arguments to the scale message, we can set the scale in different dimensions. The convention in Max is x, y, z, where x is the width, y is the height, and z is the depth. So if I say scale 1.5.5, that's going to be an object 1 meter wide, 0.5 meters high, and 0.5 meters deep. Now we can't see the depth because we're looking at this object from the front. So I'll show you another object that we can add to our jit.world called jit.gl.handle, which allows us, it creates a handle that allows us to click and drag inside the world's window, and we're moving every object inside the world around a single point of rotation. So I'm just clicking and dragging around in the window, but I can also option click and drag to pull the object further away, and I can command click and drag to move the object around. And this is on Macintosh, command click and drag, which is probably control click and drag on a PC, and option click and drag to zoom in and out. And sometimes I can get a really odd perspective when I'm using the handle. So jit.gl.handle takes a message, reset, the reset message, and if you send the reset message into the jit.gl.handle, it resets your view. Sometimes it's useful to have your color messages be the color of the color you're trying to set, so that you don't need to read the RGB color in order to know what color the message corresponds to. And since the message box accepts the color message, you'd think you could just go out of the message box and connect back into the inlet. Max doesn't let you do that because Max is scared of creating infinite loops, but there is an object called through. And the through object will allow you to take the color message and pass it through this null object back into the color message, thereby sending the color message out, through, and back in to set the color of the object. And the nice thing about this is you don't need to even leave the through object there. You can use it one time to set the color of the message box, and then get rid of it afterwards. But I'll just put it here to remind you that it's a possibility. By the way, when I shrink these things down, I'm using Command J. Command J will shrink a message or an object to size it to the contents. And if you want to line things up, that's Command Y. Command Y will place everything in a line for you. If you're on a Windows computer, that's going to be Control J and Control Y. I tend to like them staggered as a reminder of what's connected to what. So let's look at a way to send multiple messages at once. There's a new object that we create with the B key. It's a button. So if I want to send multiple things at once, I can take a single button and connect it to multiple messages. I want it to be red, diamond-shaped, and small. And it's going to do all three of those things when I hit the button. And I can have another button that makes it teal, high dimensionality, and oval. So I can switch between these two states by clicking. And since I have the handle, I can also now rotate in space and see much more clearly what's happening to my object. And note that the smooth shading is also going on and off. This is smooth shaded, as you can clearly see, and this is not smooth shaded, in order to help us see the distorted quality of the shape that we're achieving by changing its dimensionality. And these buttons are extremely handy because they can also send to multiple objects. So let's start thinking in terms of this idea of composition. And before we do that, we're going to add one more message, which is the position message. And position, the ordinary position of an object when we create it, is 0, 0, 0, the center of the screen. If we want it to move to the right, again, we have X, width, Y, height, and Z, depth. So if we want to move this to the right, we move the X in a positive direction. So position 0.500 is a half a meter to the right of center. And you may have guessed it, position negative 0.500 is a half a meter to the left of center. So now we can start thinking in terms of a composition using multiple objects, where one object is in the center. And I'll show you a nice shortcut. Option, click, and drag will duplicate. I can make this object to the right of center, and I better shrink it down. I'm going to make it even smaller. And I'll make another object that's left of center. And again, I'm using my attributes and my messages interchangeably for the moment. And I do like my objects to be neat. So sometimes I'll swap around attributes so that everything gets its own line. See, jit.gl.gridshape John, at dim 5050, at lighting enable 1, at smooth shading 1, at color 111, at position -500, at scale 0.3, I can read every line that begins with an at, and you'll see that this object is also like that. And this object isn't. Maybe if I make the color line a bit longer, see what that does. Oh yeah, that's good. So now all my ats line up along the edge. So I have my blue sphere at position 0.500, I have my red diamond in the center, and I have my white sphere at -0.500. And so now you see I'm trying to make things that look good to me. And that's what I'm talking about when I say composition, making compositions. I'm already wanting things to have a certain sort of visual harmony to them. I feel like that teal oval needs to be a little bit further to the right. That's too far. Move it back a little bit. No, I don't know why. I don't know why I want it arranged like that, but something makes me want to arrange those objects in a way that's more pleasing to me. And so that's what the homework is I want you to make 5 arrangements of objects where each arrangement is triggered by a button. And another nice thing about messages is messages can be sent to multiple objects. So here we have this dim 530 smooth shading 0 message that I'm only sending to my center object right now. I can actually send that message to all 3 objects. So when I hit this button, all 3 of my objects are responding to this message. So I can actually make this one go to all 3 objects as well. The patch cables are going to start to get messy. It's going to start to get hard to see. I'm going to show you a couple of strategies for making that nicer. One is called encapsulation. I can take a group of messages. I'm going to have that message be sent there, and I'm going to use a position 0 message. Have it slide back to the center for this one. So, okay, I like that. So when I get something I like, I can highlight it and encapsulate it. And it takes all of that stuff and it puts it in this box that starts with P, and I can call it composition 1, comp 1. And if I double-click this, everything's in there. I need to go back up here, change my font back to Monaco, change my font size again, but everything is encapsulated inside of this box. And notice that the message that goes to all 3 of them gets its own outlet from the box. And if we look out here, that outlet is connected to all 3 objects. And there's a second outlet for the things that are only connected to the middle box. So what the encapsulation does is it takes the mess away. It takes the mess and it puts it inside the box. So we can do the same thing with these messages. We'll highlight all the messages, we say edit, encapsulate, and it sticks them inside of this box. So the message that is, and we can see it did it a little bit inefficiently here, right? If we open up pcomp2, we'll see that it created 3 outlets, outlet 1, outlet 2, and outlet 3. But outlet 1 and outlet 3 both go to the same place. So we can go in here and actually get rid of outlet 3 and have this scale message go to outlet 1 as well. And then if we want to make changes, it's easier to make the changes inside here than it is outside. The one thing that's a little inconsistent about this that we might want to change, because this encapsulation is automated, so it's trying its best to make a sensible decision, but it's maybe not doing it ideally, is notice that the message that goes to all three objects is the left outlet of our composition 1, but it's the right outlet of our composition 2. That's really easy to change. You double click inside your composition and just drag the outlets into the order that you want them. So if you want the message that goes to all three of them to be on the left, then just rearrange the outlets so it does it. Actually, I think probably the better way to do it is to go into comp 1 here and drag this to the right. So that's an organizational strategy. You could see how much less messy it is and how we can now start to easily add even more objects to this composition. So I'd like you to work with 5 objects, and I'd like you to make 5 arrangements of the 5 objects using this approach, so that when you save your patch, close it, open it, turn it on, you'll have different arrangements. Now we can see that something didn't save. What didn't save is the position of this object. So I'm going to type it in as an attribute. And that might be the only thing that didn't save. Yes, everything else about my composition saved. So you learn when you close and reopen a patch, what message was missing, or what you needed to have typed in that you forgot to type in. And again, just resizing it a little bit makes all the @ signs line up. So what your patch is going to look like is 5 grid shapes across the bottom and 5 buttons, each of which has a P that changes the object into the arrangements that you want. And one other little organizational strategy that you may find helpful is color coding. So if I hold down Option and drag over these 3 patch cords, I can select them. I can also click a patch cord and then shift-click other patch cords to select them. And then I'm going to right-click and choose a color for these cords. And I'll make these cords some kind of blue. And so what that's indicating is cords that are blue are ones that go to all 3 objects. So I can do the same thing here. And I just picked that blue arbitrarily just so that I can recognize, those are the cords that go to all 3 objects. And I could choose a different color for cords that go to individual objects, for instance. Because you can see, right, it's very easy to tell the difference between the 2 types of cords now. If you make a mistake and you encapsulate something you didn't want to encapsulate, you can always edit de-encapsulate, and it'll just pop those objects right back out so that you can work with them again. And then once you've made any changes you want, you can re-encapsulate. So your homework will be 5 arrangements of 5 objects. And what I want you to do is I want you to come up with arrangements and compositions that are interesting to you and that are as different as you can get from what I'm showing you here. I want you to, even though this is very simple stuff, even though this is an extremely basic exercise, I want you to push into territory that's as interesting as you can get to. And on the blackboard, if you're in the Brooklyn College class, on the blackboard there are some tips on how to approach this sort of assignment. If you go onto the blackboard page and go to assignments, you'll see tutorial 1 and homework 1. Here's the assignment itself. Click on that for the details, how to submit, and the deadline, etc. And then if you scroll down, you'll see advice, how to create variation in your homework, and I give you a series of ideas. And I look forward to seeing your work.